Hey, what's up guys? My name's Dylan and I'm a cycling coach at Carmichael Training Systems. Today we're going to be talking about 5 of the biggest winter training mistakes that cyclists make. I'll talk about getting too ambitious too early with winter miles, what to do when you get sick, and my last tip won't just affect your winter training but your whole season, so be sure to stick around. If you're new to this channel, I make training topic videos that go over tips and tricks that I've learned in my 12 years of racing experience that have gotten me to the top of the ultra-endurance mountain bike game in the US, and that I've learned as a CTS coach. I also go into the science on your training questions, so if you want to learn how to get faster or just more about sports science, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you have a training question, be sure to leave it in the comments section below, and I'll either answer it down there or I'll do some more research and make a whole video about it. This video is a part 2 to my video on 5 of the biggest off-season mistakes that cyclists make. So if you're still in your off-season, be sure to check that out. I'll leave the link in the description below. So it's that time of year again when racers are dusting off the heart rate monitors and cycling computers and starting to put in big miles to get ready for the upcoming race season. Motivation is usually super high right now, but there are some big mistakes that you could be making that could be undermining your fitness gains and progression into the season. Let's go into 5 of the biggest winter training mistakes that I see cyclists make. The first mistake is doing too many miles too early before you're ready for it. If you did your off-season right, your motivation should be super high right now, which is great, but you can get in trouble if you start doing more than you can handle. Winter is traditionally a time to put in big miles, but if you go all in on your first month and don't give your body time to adjust to this new volume of training, you could end up injuring yourself or overtraining. We also don't want to use all that pent-up motivation all in one place in the winter and be burnt out by the summer. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for doing big miles in the winter. I do a ton of long rides this time of year myself, but you have to build up to it. If you have an idea of what the maximum amount of hours that you can sustain based on your schedule and own physical ability, then I would say start at roughly 2/3 of that and slowly build up over the course of a month or 2 until you reach that maximum. Once you do that, build up your training stress through increasing intensity, as you should be getting closer to your race season and you'll be needing to do more race-specific efforts. The next mistake is something that every serious cyclist is guilty of, including myself, and that is training through a cold or sickness. Getting sick this time of year can be hard to avoid, so when it inevitably does happen, you have to dramatically reduce your training stress if you want to get better. A cold that could last just a couple days could last weeks if you continue training normally. In my teens, when I first started training seriously, I remember one year I got a cold, and being young and inexperienced, I stubbornly kept racking up massive hours on the bike. The result was that cold lasted for over a month. During that time, my training suffered because I wasn't able to do the intensity that I needed to because I was always sick. My season started off pretty rough that year, and I learned a valuable lesson. The next time I got a cold, I took 2 or 3 days completely off the bike, and it was 90% gone, and I could get back to regular training. The plan of attack when you get a cold is to just take time off the bike or massively reduce your training stress. A couple lost days of training is better than a month of training sick. Alright, next we have comparing your peak fitness to your winter fitness. When it comes time for that first FTP test or first hard interval session, cyclists often compare those numbers to the highest numbers they've ever seen during peak race shape. What's even worse than this is that some athletes might not even do an FTP test for fear that their number is lower than they'd like it to be, and then they just assume that their peak race FTP is also their FTP right now in the winter when their fitness is lower. The big point I want to make here is that it's okay to be less fit in the winter, and in fact we want to lose fitness. The fact is, your fitness can't just increase at the same rate forever without plateauing. And the best way to overcome a plateau is rest and then rebuild. The rest would be the off season that you just had, and now you'll be less fit than you were, but now it's time to rebuild so that you can hopefully reach a higher level of fitness than you previously had when you get to the race season. The next mistake is actually a year-round problem for cyclists and athletes in general, but it can be especially tempting to make this mistake in the winter when you're trying to squeeze in extra miles, and that is not taking your recovery rides seriously. Most people do their recovery rides too hard in general. That's probably a topic for a whole nother video, but during the winter when people are trying to squeeze in extra hours, they start to add time onto their recovery rides as well. Having a longer or harder recovery ride will not benefit you. Quite the opposite, actually. Though there is a TSS or training stress score value associated with a recovery ride, indicating that it had at least some level of stress on your body, it should feel like quite the opposite. You should actually feel better after a recovery ride because you got your legs moving and you cleared them out. On your recovery rides, you shouldn't go over 55% of your functional threshold power, but you can also just do a recovery ride on feel because it should feel like you're barely pushing on the pedals at all. Just putting in the lowest amount of pressure, the minimum amount of work. Make sure your recovery ride route doesn't have any steep climbing, or really any climbing for that matter. Basically, with a recovery ride, the flatter it is, the better. If you do have climbing in a recovery ride, even if your power is low, there'll be a lot of tension on your muscles, which we don't want. Also, make sure that your recovery ride isn't much longer than an hour. Having a longer recovery ride won't benefit you. During a rest week or during the race season, there's sometimes value to doing a longer recovery ride, but if you're in the middle of a high volume winter training block, there's no need to add volume to your recovery rides. I'd recommend having 2 recovery days a week, 1 completely off, meaning no activity, and 1 active recovery, so that would be when you do your recovery ride. One last thing with the recovery rides in the winter is that if the weather is less than optimal, just go ahead and do them on the trainer. I'm all for getting outside to do training rides in the winter to keep up your motivation, even if it's wet or cold, but recovery rides are the exception to this. Going really slow for an hour just to get really cold won't help you with your recovery, and putting on a ton of gear to get ready for a recovery ride can be draining. Our last mistake is one that won't only affect your winter training, but your whole season, and that is being a first race peaker. What do I mean by this? Well, I'm talking about the athletes who look at the first race on the calendar and decide that they need to be in peak race shape for that race and train accordingly. The season is long and you need to think about what your most important races are. If they don't come until the summer, which is the case for most of us, then you have plenty of time. You actually do more damage starting training and starting training with intensity too early than you do if you started a little bit later than you should. This is because the chances of plateauing or burning out mid-season if you start training too early are much higher. The mid-race season slump can be due to a lot of factors, but one of them is definitely starting training too early in the winter. Some of us do this more unintentionally by loading up on a lot of late winter or early spring races and hard group rides. Races and hard group rides in the winter can be a good thing for your training, but only if you use them strategically. My recommendation would be not to taper at all for any early season races, just treat them as if they were any other workout, and for hard group rides, just stick to your training plan. If others want to sprint and race on a hard winter group ride, like it's June and the national championships are 2 weeks away, then just go ahead and let them do it. I actually had this exact conversation with an athlete of mine a week ago. He was telling me that he couldn't let the dudes on his local winter group ride beat him because he'd never be able to live it down. My advice to him was just go ahead and let them do it, let them laugh and make fun. You're going to be the one laughing when it's race season and you're getting results, and they're in burnout mode because they were racing in mid-January. Alright guys, those are 5 of the biggest winter training mistakes that I see cyclists make. Let's take a minute and do a quick recap. The first big mistake is getting too eager with your winter miles before your body is ready for it, which could lead to injury or overtraining. Next, we have training through a cold. Training through a cold will just make that cold last way longer than it should. The best thing to do when you get a cold is take a couple days off or greatly reduce your training stress until you get better so you can get back to training. Then we have comparing your peak numbers to your winter numbers, or using your peak FTP in the winter. It's okay for your fitness to go down in the winter, and in fact we want it to, because we want your fitness to ebb and flow throughout the year. Your fitness won't just continuously go up forever without reaching a plateau. That's just the physiology of fitness over time. Not doing your recovery ride right is another big one. In the winter, people are trying to fit in hours, so they figure that doing a longer recovery ride will help them do that. Doing a 2-hour recovery ride won't benefit you, and in fact will probably be detrimental to your overall performance. The last mistake is training for your first race on the calendar like it's your A race of the season, or adding in too many early season races or hard winter group rides. Remember, the season is long, and just like a long race, you want to pace yourself and not blow all your matches in the first month or 2 of race season. Alright, those are my 5 winter training mistakes. If you're still in off-season mode, be sure to check out my off-season mistakes video. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who might be interested, and be sure to subscribe to this channel for more. For even more coaching content, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you want to follow my training leading into this upcoming race season, be sure to check me out on Strava. Finally, if you're interested in coaching, shoot me an email at djohnson@trainright.com.